Welcome, everyone. You are here for It's Complicated. We're talking about Black mothers and daughters. This is a part two discussion. So, this is a requested topic. And I just want to just say a few things before we get into the panel discussion that we know that this is not representative of all Black mother-daughter relationships. However, there has been a request, multiple requests, to talk about complicated relationships between Black mothers and daughters. So again, we're not talking about this is the full range of Black mother and daughter relationships, but this is a requested topic. So if you cannot relate to this topic and you have a different relationship with your mother, this may not be the video for you. But if you have complicated relationships with your mother, this is the video for you. And the reason we want to talk about this is that a lot of times when there is this complicated relationship with Black mothers and daughters, a lot of times Black daughters feel very uncomfortable talking about it. So we want to provide a space for Black daughters to talk about these experiences and also to talk about healing. So the part one talked a lot about the experiences. This conversation today is going to talk more about healing. Okay. So if you don't know me already, I'm Dr. Kamani. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a toxic job survivor, and more importantly, I'm a toxic job liberator for Black women. So we have a panel discussion part two. I'm going to have each of my panelists introduce themselves, and we're going to get right to discussion. So I'll call them off as I see them listed. So Carolyn, we'll start with you. You're on mute, Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn Coleridge. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, licensed in 4 states, and I've been a therapist for 30 years. And I'm also intuitive healer. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Mara.
Hey everyone, my name is Mara and I am a content creator. I have a YouTube channel called Let's Talk About It with Mara, and I basically talk about my journey in the healing process.
Thank you. Danny.
Hi everyone, I'm Danny Ellison. I'm a reparenting coach for Black women. I help them transform their lives after going no contact with narcissistic abusers who tend to be their mothers, and I am 6 years no contact with my mother.
Thank you, Danny. Tisha.
Hello, my name is Tisha Mitchell, your midlife makeover maven, and I empower college-educated midlife women who have experienced the pain of being in a toxic relationship or marriage, going through menopause and or recovering from another major life transition. I help them rediscover their true selves and create the midlife of their dreams. I have a YouTube channel, the Midlife Makeover Movement.
Thank you. And ladies, I have all of their information in the description section, just as I had for part one. So if you haven't seen part one discussion, please watch that as well. So for today, again, we're going to be talking about healing. So I'm going to start with Mara, Tisha, Danny. If you all can talk a little bit about your healing journey in relation to having a complicated relationship with your mother. And I'll open up to whoever wants to start.
I would say for me, the relationship journey really was putting language to what I experienced. It was very difficult to understand what it is I was feeling until I could put some language to it. Oftentimes I was second guessing myself and feeling like there was something going on with me because I didn't really understand what was going on. We talked in the last segment about emotional incest, where I really was my mother's partner more than her child. And I think when I realized, or really had I think the hardest day for me was realizing it was my mother that I needed protection from rather than people in the world. And so there was, it was very insidious. It wasn't anything that I could really kind of put a finger on, but it was just difficult for me to accept because I didn't know what it was. So the healing journey for me has been to step out of it, be in therapy, and do a lot of reading, healing, and being in a safe environment to share what those feelings were.
Yeah. So you talked about putting language to it. And I think what's painful for many Black women who have reached out to me is the idea that the mother is supposed to be, right? That we're taught that the mother is the one who's the protector, the nurturer, and all these things. And when the mother is not that, it's very difficult. And I think that contributes to the shame. That's why a lot of Black women don't talk about it, because there's a shame of the mother is to be revered and all. You don't bad talk to your mother, all that kind of stuff. So you said giving the language, therapy, and also just taking space and doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Right, Tisha?
Yeah, and I think also studying other women. And I think there was a freedom that came when I heard another woman say, I felt like I wanted to be the child in the family rather than the mother. And all of a sudden the light bulb went off, and I felt like it's almost like we were competing to see who could be cared for the most in the relationship rather than one person taking the role as adult. And one of the things that really bothered me so much was, my mom would say all the time, we grew up together. And I could not figure out why that would burn me up. What I realized is that it wasn't for us to grow up together. One of us, my mother, needed to grow up to raise me.
Yeah.
Not we were both children. So I often felt like her sibling rather than her child. But again, those were things that I just felt inherently, but without having that language and not having a safe space to share those things, again, I felt like maybe there was something going on with me. I was a problem. There was that shame, that reverence that you have for your mother that felt out of place.
Yes. Yes. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation now, is that I think a lot of Black women who have this issue, there's that sense of shame, sense of I'm alone, like I don't understand this. But when you hear other Black women talk about it, you feel validated. And so that's why I appreciate you sharing that. What about for you, Mara and Danny? What has your healing journey looked like?
Well, for me, my healing journey, um, I feel like I'm starting to realize how it kind of goes back to what Tisha said, how big community is. I think being in community and being in these type of spaces is definitely helps, because I definitely did feel like I was alone, and I also felt like there was something wrong with me, before I just started to healing. I also stopped dating because I felt like I was trying to connect myself to people instead of like actually working on the stuff that I needed to work on. And I had to do that to help with my healing journey. And I had started EMDR therapy a few months ago. And because I do have PTSD, so finding the right therapist, which was kind of difficult, because it's not just like a one size fit all type of thing. So finding a
True.
therapist that I felt comfortable with and that I connected with, and I felt open enough to speak about certain things, because I've had some therapists who were very gaslighty in the past. So just
Mm.
taking my time with that, yeah,
Mhm.
I've had some weird experiences in the past, but
Wow.
being able to trust myself in a way and just being part of the community.
Yeah. So I'm hearing community. I'm hearing the need to protect yourself. So Tish, you talked about protection from your mother. Mara, you talking about even with romantic relationships, having to kind of step back because you know you need to protect yourself. And the issue about
Mhm.
therapy, again, one size fits all doesn't work. And so sometimes it's
Yeah.
like an interview process that you have to see, how does this therapist, do they relate to me? Are they
Yeah.
saying things that can help me or not? But what I appreciate you saying, Mara, and sharing that story is that even if you have a negative encounter or a few negative encounters with
Mhm.
therapists, don't just give up on
Mhm.
therapy. It's just the wrong
Yeah.
therapist. Just keep going and going and
Yeah.
going until you find the right therapist.
Yeah, I had a therapist who I was telling her about my experience with my mom, and
Mhm.
she kind of was just like, "Wow, you can't give her any more grace." And I'm just like, "Girl, what?" Like, I'm
Wow.
abused, like, and that really like it threw me off, but I knew something about it wasn't right. So I was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, no, this is not going to work." But
Yeah.
yes, and going no contact. Like I knew I could not heal and be in communication with my abuser.
Mhm.
It just didn't make any sense to me. So
Yeah.
and once I went no contact, I started to look at every negative thing in my life. I was like, whoop, some friends gotta go, some jobs gotta go.
Purge it, right? To protect yourself.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Mara. What about for you, Danny?
I can make a lot of connections to what both ladies just shared. For me, healing really began when I went no contact. Because what I learned and what I now tell clients is you cannot heal and cope at the same time. So you have to first be willing to cut the cord and remove the mother figure, the narcissistic abuser, whoever it may be, from your life so that you can truly be safe enough to start the healing process. And then finding the language that fit my experience was significant because when I learned what narcissistic abuse was, I was able to put the language to the experience and realize that it fit a profile. So it kind of paved the way for that community that both ladies spoke about. Because from there, I was able to realize, oh, I need to identify, learn to identify as a victim of narcissistic abuse in order to be able to heal. And that is a big step. Women are, especially Black women, are very hesitant to identify as a victim because we believe we need to be strong. And if we identify as a victim, we're being weak, and that is somehow frowned upon. And so I found the Raised by Narcissists forum on Reddit. That is a fabulous resource that I recommend to all my clients. It's a free community that you can access through Reddit. And there are over 100,000 other adult yes.
Wow.
Yes, so many. Yes. From all walks of life, from around the world. And the beautiful thing about it is you can read through their experiences and you can identify with someone who's completely different than you because you had the same exact experience of narcissistic abuse. And you learn that you're not alone. And that is really empowering because it helps to dispel what Mara was speaking about when you feel like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Or like, why am I not able to love myself? Why can I not engage in loving relationships with the people around me when that's really what I want? And when you realize that the quote unquote, what is wrong with you is that you have post-traumatic stress from being abused, really CPTSD from being abused, that you haven't touched on, that you haven't even acknowledged, let alone begin to express and, you know, take power over, then yeah, you really don't know where to go without being able to put a name to the community you belong in.
Yeah.
So that was helpful. I also went to therapy. I, like Mara, had a disheartening experience with a therapist up front. I went to the therapist provided to me by my insurance through my job at the time. And although it was supposedly top tier insurance through the big HMO in California, I could only see a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. It was not an option. And so I was resistant to that, but I needed the support. So I went, and that woman told me to take 12 weeks of unpaid FMLA leave from my job to go to group therapy sessions that were not at all relevant to what I was going through, and to take addictive medication, antidepressants that had really extreme side effects. And when I expressed that I wasn't comfortable with that, she told me I would not get better if I did not take pills.
Wow.
She became it was the craziest experience.
Wow.
She got aggressive. She was like mad that I didn't want to take the pills. And so I left. I never went back. I had to pay for my therapy out of pocket. But I was able to find a woman who specialized in narcissistic abuse. And so this was a woman, she was a white woman. However, she was the right fit for me because she understood, and she never questioned me. She never caused me to doubt or try to defend my abuser in any way. So that was helpful. And then, of course, I've said it before, I'll continue to share about auricular acupuncture as a means of healing that post-traumatic stress. That was a game changer for me. I had been
Can you talk a little bit more about the acupuncture? Because I was going to ask you a follow-up question about that.
Definitely. So the auricular therapy speaks to a broad range of different acupuncture that can be done using the ear. And the ear holds basically a microcosm of the entire body. So a number of different things can be treated through auricular therapy. But there's a particular protocol called the NADA protocol. That's NADA protocol that involves putting pressure on 5 specific points within the ear.
Mm-hmm.
And by putting pressure on those points, we're able to manipulate the nerves that connect to specific areas of the brain that can help to release trauma, reduce anxiety, helps with insomnia, with chronic pain. It's actually the technique used to treat soldiers in battle. It's referred to as battlefield acupuncture.
Mm.
And I think it's an unturned rock, I think, in the healing community, especially for Black women, because no matter what your experience is with the mother wound, as a Black woman, especially here in America, you are carrying some trauma you don't know about. And so when you use that auricular acupuncture to signal to the body that it's okay to release that stored pain, you get to your repressed memory. And repressed memory, you will not know. If you're not consciously doing that work, you don't realize that you're carrying a repressed memory. It is something that your psyche has literally hidden away from you since you were a child, since the time that it occurred, because you weren't ready to process it. So,
Danny, how did you even find out about this?
I kind of stumbled into it because I was already no contact. I think I'd been no contact for a few years. So I had been in therapy, but I reached a point where I felt like I've done all this work, but I still feel stuck sometimes. And I can't understand why. You know, I now understand my condition a lot better, but emotionally I keep repeating the same cycles. And no matter what I do cognitively, I can't seem to let myself out of this loop. And I started exploring acupuncture just as a means of a way to take care of myself and improve my health. But the acupuncturists I work with suggested auricular acupuncture for PTSD. And I tell you, after that first session, it was the same day. By the time I went to sleep that night, I was exhausted from crying, and it did not stop. I cried every single day for 9 months, multiple times a day.
Wow.
So it is intense. The more you're carrying, the more intense your experience with it will be. But it took 9 months. It was like emptying a water can. You know, I just had to continue to cry I had to learn to just make space for the tears. I could be in the middle writing an email. Oh, I got to take a break so I can let these tears out about something that happened 15 years ago, journal about it real quick, and then get back to what I'm doing. And after 9 months, it helped me to reach a moment of clarity that I could not otherwise have accomplished.
And how would Black women find this type of acupuncture? So
depending where you are, modern acupuncture is a sort of a mainstream chain of acupuncture clinics. So that's one option. Most of your employer provided insurance covers a few sessions of acupuncture for free. I think it's like 5 to 8 sessions is standard. So you can look through your network to see who offers those services. But in your city, you can find an acupuncturist. You might have to look a little bit. If you're somewhere that's a little more off the grid. And if you're outside of the country, you're still going to find acupuncturists. In fact, it may be more accessible depending on where you are. So it shouldn't be too hard to find. And anyone who's practicing acupuncture should be aware of the NADA protocol and should be able to treat you. But also, if that's not an option, there are something called ear seeds that you can buy online. You can buy them from Amazon. They come in like a pack of 600. They're pretty inexpensive. And you can use them to apply pressure to those points yourself at home. They're like stickers. You just wear them on the specific points, and you can wear them for days at a time. I would say do something like that with the guidance of an acupuncturist. You should not undertake the treatment alone because it is very intense. So please get that one-on-one support so you can have some guidance as you do it. But it is an option if you are not in a position to find someone to work with, or you can't afford it, or whatever the case may be. You can engage the protocol at home.
Wow. Okay. And I heard all three of you talk about community, right? And Danny, you talked about Reddit in terms of community. Mara, what about you, Mara and Tisha? How did you all find community in relation to dealing with, having a challenging relationship with your mother? How did you find community?
I'm actually familiar with the Reddit, Danny, that you spoke about. I just actually stunned upon it like not just a couple of weeks ago, and you
Mhm.
are right. It literally is a lot of people who speak about being raised by a narcissist. Sometimes I have to step away because I'm like, whoo, I felt like it can be a little triggering, but
Oh,
finding community, but in like not in a bad way, but
okay.
finding community on YouTube. I mean, I've met a lot of amazing or stumbling upon like a lot of like content creators who speak about this type of stuff or just talk about healing in general,
Mm-hmm.
and just like reading the comments. I followed this woman, she's called Spiritual Whistleblower, and she was the one who kind of um taught me about narcissism because I didn't know what it was. um I didn't know what narcissism was until like the pandemic, and I was hearing her talking about it, and I was just like in my mind checking off everything that she was saying,
Mm-hmm.
and just following going online and just kind of doing research, going on YouTube and just following people who talk about healing and talk about those same type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Wow. What about for you, Tisha?
Mine is similar. Actually, mine really kind of started on my divorce journey. And I remember being in therapy prior to getting a divorce, and my therapist saying, your husband and your mother show up as the same person in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked, was I ready to get a divorce? And I said, I think that's the wrong question. It is, am I ready to do the work that's required of divorce? So for me, it started with having one safe person to be able to share everything with, just mostly the confusing feelings at first,
Mm-hmm.
and then moving towards divorce recovery. And then studying, the fact that my mother and my husband had the same traits.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is like I'm not just healing from one part of the journey, I'm healing them both at the same time. And I
Right.
really can relate to Danny when I nearly cried. I cried nearly every day for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching my world crumble around me. I'm watching my marriage completely fall apart. And I really had to get to the stem of where it started. And
Mm-hmm.
that was back in childhood, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
this was just a pattern of repeating itself. So it's the same with Mara, and that is YouTube and books. And I'm with a support group called Empowered to Change with Leslie Vernick. And before that, I was with her group called Conquer, where we were really studying biblically about boundaries, about
Mm-hmm.
narcissism, about what the Bible says about honoring, what that really means. And how a lot of times we've been spiritually abused into compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And we really started breaking down what the Bible really means. And what I heard the most is God does not care more about your relationship than he does you as an individual inside of it. And so I kept feeling like there was something wrong with me because of difficulty in the relationship, when
Mm-hmm.
it's in actuality, it's no, God cares about you too. And this
Mm-hmm.
relationship is destructive.
Ah, wow. Okay. So, ladies, if you guys can send me all those resources so I can put in the description section, okay? There's a lot of stuff. So Carolyn, I'm wondering for you as a therapist, because we've talked about, healing journeys and just wondering as a therapist for Black women clients who come to you who have challenging relationships with their Black mothers, what are some of the ways that you support them in their healing journey?
Okay, a couple of things. One thing is that when you guys, as people use the word abuser, I'm glad they use that word because that's a very different than just a mean mother or a difficult mother. There's a different level when they're very abusive, and that's when some people do have to leave because if somebody was treating you like that on the street, you wouldn't like keep a relationship with or an employer.
Mhm.
So I think I'm glad that they've identified that. Like, this isn't abusive. This is not like we're petty. We don't get along sometimes, or she gets on my nerves. This is severe, emotional, physical, and other types of abuse that happen within, family environments. I'm going to talk about healing, but I love what Danny was saying about that acupuncture, because I go to acupuncture all the time. And there's a lot of, I'm an energy healer. And I didn't know why. I was a hands-on healer for years. I worked at UCLA as an energy healer, and that's Reiki, but I also do pranic and I do soul retrieval. And I've done that mostly with my spiritually oriented counseling clients, where when you have trauma, part of your soul leaves. It just kind of goes. Like, think of a glass. If a glass breaks, the pieces go everywhere. So at age 10, if your mother or somebody was very mean to you, that part of the soul just leaves and goes, and that the qualities of kindness or innocence or sweetness will leave too. So a soul retrieval is where I actually bring back, and I've done this in groups, where you bring back, you talk to community, that part of you that's lost, part of your soul that's missing, the innocence, the kindness, the creative part. And then you it's a whole method, but you reconnect with it. And then what happens is that when I was doing it on the table with some Black women, I literally see their energy moving, where they're like reconnecting with an aspect of them that's gone, that actually they felt so bad, but that was safety. That was smart. That was survival to get out of the situation. So you bring it back, and then those qualities come back slowly. So that's just another aspect. Also, as an energy hands-on healer, I look at, as you heard before, soul cycles. What cycle are you in? Are you in a time where this is going to come up deep, a lunar return or a Saturn return? And then I help them unbridge it, because soul cycles have to do with generational trauma, ancestral trauma. And if you learn about that, you realize that you come back in not traumatized, not to be traumatized, but to become a teacher for that next generation that didn't have the tools to, be able to heal them. You come in as people, your mother may say, you're a problem child, you're a problem. No, you're not a problem, you're a prophet, because you are prophesizing the next level, the next generation, her grandchildren maybe, and other people, to help them to overcome. So nobody, when you come into this lifetime, and this is looking like as a soul, not just as a person, and, in African culture, they're very much into, soul healing and doing ancestral connections, etc. There's a great article by some people in Uganda where they had trauma there, with a lot of the wars and stuff. And they said that the people were doing tapping. And some of you might have heard of EFT, when you tap on certain parts of the meridians. And they were doing other stuff and just putting in a room. So the way the Africans describe it is like, we didn't understand, not the tapping, but they put us in a room and they had us replay the story over and over again. There was no drums, there was no sun, there was no community. How could we heal? We didn't understand it. So they said they kicked them out of their village, and then they got the drums out and started dancing, like getting that energy off. That's why we like to dance so much, because our energy gets stuck in our energy field, our aura. So they take it off. And then they said the sun was healing. That's like the divine light coming on them. And then the community was healing, because they had a global trauma. So there's a lot of different types of different, healing things. And then as an energy healer, I look at the chakras, the energy. Like I'll give them a color, a map of colors, and I'll say, oh, you can't see it, but you can see right there.
I see it.
Yeah, and I say, what color do you feel attracted to? And they'll say yellow. And I said, well, yellow is your solar plexus, so you're losing power. How can we get back your power? And it's more concise. They'll say purple. I said, okay, you're looking for your purpose. Why? How can we find your purpose? So using spiritual type techniques, letting the people know that these are part of, as a soul, part of the steps to evolve your community, your genetic line, different things that happen. Another thing is like when they said, the mother says, oh God, you're so annoying. No, they're anointed. Again, you are a higher being that comes in to teach the next generation. You're a doormat. No, you're not a doormat. You're a doorway. Again, to be a person that comes in and heals. So it's a really different way, of working with people. But your original question was, when I work with them,
first of all, I gotta say that's all deep. What you were just saying, I was like, Whoa, like that was really deep, really deep. Okay, go on. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So you want to know like what kind of things that and there's a lot. I work with a lot of Black women that are, survivors of abuse, or, they had to walk away, or I don't talk to her anymore. And also that's part of the trauma within our, culture of slavery, where they separated, and
Yeah.
that was, part of it. And then it's hard to re-separate, but also for survival. But also then the Black slaves, where they, they make sure they put different tribes together so they can fight. So that was always embedded in us. And a lot of women who have difficulty with mothers sometimes have problems in the workplace too, but not because there's something wrong with them. It's because that they've been already primed to be abused, because
Can okay, you got to speak to this. Okay, can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Is it sounding better now? Because
it's a little staticky, but we can hear you. We can hear you. Yeah.
So how they're primed in the workplace. So what happens is the first circle that we're in is our family. And that teaches us how to work in groups. So then if the mother is abusive towards the child, they are set up to believe, oh, I'm a scapegoat. Consciously or unconsciously. That's an important thing, because a lot of this trauma is unconscious and deep, and it's not something that you're aware of. And I do another method called theta healing, which is, and I did that at a major HMO, where you move trauma on the soul level, past life, ancestral, and genetic. So, and that's connected to God. That's a spiritual type of healing technique. But so then when you get into the workplace and somebody's demeaning to you, or mean, or, abusive, it's like, wait, this sounds familiar. And you may close down. You may get very angry. You may freeze. You say there's 3 methods of dealing with anxiety and trauma: is fright, flight, or fight,
flight, or freeze,
or frozen, and that frozen is from trauma. So again, shaking off. Another thing which I do in this group is, since it gets stuck in your aura, is smudge, sage. You smudge, and a lot of people of color like that. They may have Native American roots, or their grandma saged, and it's like clearing out that energy so you don't attract the same thing in, because we're energy beings. So you get a boss is very similar, and it just feels it's like an old wound being reopened. Is extreme. And this is why you become, you probably become the prophet, because because people like that have these horrible situations, a lot of times they don't like to work in groups. I've been there, done that, my first family. So you become an entrepreneur. So it's not always, I'm saying it is bad. It's horrible, horrible. I've heard horrid stories, horrid. But what it does, it opens you up. This was your prime as a soul to come in and to do something else. To connect to the divine father. And if you don't have a father, a mother, and Mother Earth, whatever that may be, what is my purpose here? I'm not here to be abused. So it's very easy. So when I did the work stress group, that would eventually come up. I wouldn't say at the beginning, because in the work stress group I worked in, like 75, 80% of the people that were in the work stress group were African American. And it was so sad, because they were, primed from ancestral trauma. You're not valuable to work. We never paid you anyways. So it was so deep and unconscious. And then I would hear their stories, and then I would say, what's your purpose? And that was very important. So my purpose is something else. But it was also to say, eventually, like maybe after the 6th week or individually, does this person remind you of anyone? They're demeaning, they're aggressive, they're demoralizing, they're discriminatory, they're scapegoating you. Didn't you say your mother's like that? Oh my gosh, this is my mother.
Wow.
So that happens in, father to, because everything's a group, so the next group is your workplace, but then people leave, and that's good. And I say, okay, that you're not a victim, you're going to be a victor. What's the next step? How can you start the business? That's when you connect to the divine and correct something else, because again, you're not a doormat, you're a doorway. Okay. You're not crushed, you're creative. So, all these different aspects of understanding that the soul's journey cycles, moon cycles, and all that other stuff that our ancestors were really deep into. And that's how we self-healed with nature. We walked on the ground. We connected to the sun.
Mhm.
We ate, off the earth. We went into the earth. We connected to our ancestors. What is this here to learn? This is not, this is not meant to be. And then also the distortion that happened where we were pitted against each other's. Mothers and daughters were pitted against each other's. Fathers and sons. I mean, you know the trauma. It's
Mhm.
horrific.
Mhm.
So then sometimes that's recreated. So I helped to heal them, heal the space. One woman could not sleep for months. So when they did this walk and they came back, I would smudge them. And she's like, I haven't slept in 3 weeks. And I finally was able to sleep because she was holding on to and it's like sleeping on dirty, sheets. That energy gets connected to you. So understanding that you are not what somebody else's projection is. I was teaching a class this today in my practice.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Repeat that. What did you say?
Okay.
You are not what other people project on. Can you repeat that?
Yes. I think that's what I say. It just comes through sometimes. Yeah, you are not what other people project onto you. Like you are not the mother. Like I was doing a class on spiritual development and intuition and finding your purpose. And every woman in the group had problems with their mother.
Wow.
3 were, addicts, addict mothers. One had every single person. I said, everyone raised their hand. And I said, okay, we're going to give it back. That's true forgiveness. That's a hard word. And I said, I know you guys don't like it. And they did not. And I said, so let's turn it around. Forgive, give it forth. Give it back to them. That's their karma. That's not yours. They will have to live that. And they will have to recreate that. This is my belief. I believe in karma. I believe in what energy you put out comes back. But but like for them to just put it back to that person and say, I don't need them. And a lot of them have cut their family members off. And these are women from multicultural groups, Asia, America, African American, everywhere, and they all, will put it back and they realize that they had gifts. So I said, what gifts did you give? I'm responsible. I don't abuse my kids. I'm really smart. I'm a survivor. I have a heightened intuition. I'm an oracle in the sense of I help other young women. One woman started a center for girls. And for some reason, because her mother was so horrible, she would deal with the most wretched girls and they would listen to her, because that was her training.
Yeah.
And she wasn't afraid to go there with them in a loving, kind way. She could not re-abuse because that's not her job. But then, kind of create a safe space. And so I said, this is why you went through this. Oh, Lord, I don't want to hear. What else would it be? Did you just get an award? I did get an award for my play. She got an award.
Wow.
And these are girls that are trafficked.
Ooh.
You talk about,
so much
trauma.
Yes.
Mother and father. Mothers who pimped out their girls, Yeah. So, that's again, is that extreme abuse? That is, okay, go. And people say, I'm not talking to my mother. Never judged. Said, okay. That was a person that had you in incarceration and now you're free. And if it's right in your face, you can't heal.
Yeah.
You have that distance. You could see clearly, oh, this is my end. This is not who I was.
And somebody to reality test with them, right? Because when they're in the situation, they're in it. They're first of all trying to protect themselves, and then they're being gaslit. So they're like, they think there's something wrong with them. And so to have someone to reality test with them. Now, what about this, Carolyn? So you talked a lot about, because it's therapy, but you're also an energy healer. So how could a Black woman find someone like you? So if they can't work with you, how would they even find someone like you? Like, how would they even know what to ask in terms of trying to find someone who does the work that you do?
Yeah. And what's interesting, I'm glad you said that, because just like other people have said in the group, I did not like this therapist and she was maybe Black or that. God bless you. You need to do that because not everyone's a match. And sometimes that person will trigger something in you. And sometimes they're not healed.
True.
or they're not able to work through it. And sometimes, I always say sometimes people just don't like me, and that's okay. They're like, I don't know this kind of really witchcraft you're doing, but put that bowl down, But, and also whenever I do deep work, I always pray ahead of time. This is not a patient, this is a soul. God, how can I help this child in front of me? How can I help your child? I'm just a channel for that information, for that healing. That's a very different way. I think her name is Dr. Shana. She's in LA, or Shane, her. Yeah, I
Oh,
think.
Shanna Young.
Yeah, I think she's a psychologist,
Uh-huh.
and she has a wonderful network on her website.
Okay.
There
I'll
is
put her
some,
in the description too.
yes, there's a wonderful woman I embodied. The embodied Black woman, I think it is. God, let her name come to me. She was in Forbes, and it's beautiful. And they're not all therapists, but she had these deep, my gosh, women who come and spoke. There was this African man that talked about slavery in a different way. I've never heard about it. I mean, she a lot of times it's free. She has, embodied Black woman, I think it is, embodied life.
Okay.
Her name will come into my head, but there's her. There's tons. Look up energy healers, and I actually was surprised that as I was working, a lot of therapists, younger Black therapists in their 20s, were energy healers. Like, wow, because it is difficult, because we're not supposed to touch with hands. And how can you be a licensed therapist and not touch? So I had a spiritual practice, and then I had a regular therapy practice, and I didn't mix it. The only time I mixed it, which I asked, the divine, is when I had a client. I worked on Wall Street in an employee assistance program. I was 30. And this African American woman came to me, and she was, like in her 50s at the time. She was a lesbian. She was a assault survivor for domestic violence for protecting herself. And in the South, women who protect themselves with a gun get major jail time.
Wow.
She was an alcoholic, and she was also suicidal. And she was making a plan, and she was telling me how she's going to kill herself. And I was like, oh, Lord, I'm a new young therapist. How am I going to deal with this? So I prayed, and I heard, send a Reiki symbol to her. So Reiki is a Japanese energy healing. I send a symbol, not with my hands. I just, by thought, telepathy. And she was talking. Now, because she had so many levels against her, in terms of traditional society, I knew she was an old soul. Because knowing that old souls come in with multiple issues to deal with, or challenges. If you're African American, I'll just use that because we are all in the room, you do not have a free pass. People do not give you they don't give you a pass. You have to really,
That's not easy way.
No, because you're identifiable. But as a soul, you came in that way because A, you didn't want to forget the creator. Is my belief. And then B, you wanted maybe to clear your karma. And then also you heal many, if you believe in past lives, many lifetimes when you have multiple things at one time, like a child who's autistic or mentally retarded. People judge people like that. These are older souls. Older souls pick more difficult lifetimes. Does this make sense to people? I don't want to go, they pick harder lifetimes. So that's why they go into, and I had my own experiences, with that, and, almost being killed in a hospital and near death experience. So I learned a lot about souls, and the African American body is actually quite, it's very hard to get into one from the other side. It sounds crazy, but anyone who carries the light of the divine, it's because that they always want to remember. Like I had a friend who said, why are all these rappers always say thank you God? I said, because we didn't want to forget where we came from. Okay, so if you're in a lot of trauma, you're always going to look back. You're always going to look up. Sorry, and you're always going to know that. So that's, and you see it with mentally retarded kids with Down syndrome. They are the loving, wonderful people without disabilities. All these challenges are attributes that give you another gift. And a gift to remember. And I saw that over and over when every single Black woman in a group of 40, for weeks, I did this for years, they always had a purpose. Always. Do other groups have it? Yes, 100%. But just seeing so many women of color dealing with racial harassment in the workplace, bullying, sexism, all over and over and over, and then but I'm supposed to be a foster care mom. I want to start, home for girls. We'll ask, and then, oh my God, I got a grant, you know.
Mm.
It was almost like miracles,
Well,
work.
you said something, I think, in the previous discussion that was like struck my soul when you said sometimes these things happen to us at these jobs, these toxic jobs for Black women, because we were designed for something greater,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
right?
yes, I believe that. Little bias being, but because I've seen it, because I worked in a lot of different settings, and just to see, I go really deep, but just to see that so many of them had a connection. A woman, I had like two, and these women were in my groups, and I'm writing about it, so they gave me permission. I'm not going to give their names, of course, but I had these two bus drivers, and they were so tapped into spirit, and they would say that, yeah, I had my cousin got killed, and he came to me and gave me the name of the killer. I'm like, what?
Wow.
Or somebody else happened. She goes, I had this dream that I was on this planet, and then this happened and that happened, and then when people come up to me on the bus, I give them messages, and then just speaking, and then they go away. And I had to put them in my group. I was like, how am I getting the other bus drivers? And I realized the bus is like a journey through life. Everything's symbolic. And when
Mm-hmm.
people get on, they get a message, and then they leave,
Mm-hmm.
and they said that it happened over and over and over again. And I just thought that was so magical. And there
Mm-hmm.
actually are books. If I'd known, I would have brought it. There's a book about angels. And a lot of the earlier angels, people have said, were like the Black Madonna. They look black.
Mm.
Yeah. Like I was in a
You
place.
reference to your book.
I will. Yes. Yeah. I had.
Is the
Yeah.
book
I have
already
it.
out?
Say it again.
Is the book already out?
Oh, it's been out for a while. I see it over
Oh,
there. It's an older book.
okay.
But yeah, because people who, again, our ancestors were tapped in. But I went to an event in Topanga Canyon, and this young white guy was like, yeah, I jumped out of my body and almost died. And this woman came up to me. She looked like a mermaid, and she looked just like you. And I was sitting there, and I was looking around. he's, he's like, you look just like you. And then he said, then I saw a whole stream of angels. They all look like you. And I said, really? That's
Hmm.
interesting. And he said, and my parents thought I was crazy. They were like almost neo-Nazis. But yeah, I was like, wow. And I've heard this before because, I mean, it's not like arrogance. It's just history. We're the first people incarnated. So
Yeah.
we hold the DNA of the whole cosmos and the whole planetary system. And there is a guy named Richard King. He's passed on. He's a psychiatrist. He used to work in LA for DMH, and he'd have people come and speak. It was called the Aquarian Foundation. And there was one author, and he has a book too, about the different things that a lot of the energies in the cosmos, the dark matter, has melanin in it. Why is that? Yeah. And it's because, and that energy is it's the original, like how the planets get formed. They said, God said, let there be light. I don't think he said it. I think he thought it, breathed it out, but we need thought. Okay. And then it happened. And then it's the same thing, is that the cosmos is where the beginning maybe, and there may be different planets or different systems. My father was a minister. He just passed on a couple months ago, and very traditionally trained, Episcopal bishop of Connecticut. And before he passed, he said, number one, he saw a white light. He goes, can you turn off that light? I said, what light? It's like, this is white light. It keeps me up at night. And then number two, he said, God made many, many, many universes. So this is like, this is a man that's traditionally chained. They said, what are you doing with these little crystals? But at the end of his life, he saw the other side of that. But what I'm saying is that there's a lot of knowing that the cosmos are created through thought and sound, and that we were the original people, Mother Earth, and the earth is brown. that we also have a high destiny to be teachers. Now we got off the topic about mothers, but if that generation who
you went like extreme mother, right? Right, like you went all the way. Yes.
Well, because some of these mothers didn't get these messages. They didn't go to therapy. They did not. They were, the abuse of abuse. They were saddened. And some of the things that I've seen, I actually made a little list of why mothers are so resentful of their daughters, is jealousy. I didn't get that opportunity. Why did you? And they just were in these horrible containers for so long. Now, it's bad enough for to see Black boys being or boys and men, but boys especially. I remember in New York where all these young boys were being killed everywhere. But to see it, and now there's protests, but years ago with the lynchings and stuff, there was nothing. That is an energetic trauma, and they had tried to protect the boys, but they took it out on the girls, unknowingly or unconsciously, or maybe not some, not all. Self-hatred, we have to call it out. I said this at one seminar for Black wellness. Women got mad, but a lot of Black women, we carry that, like self-hatred, because it's constantly put on us. Hey, this, blah, blah, blah. People making money off the way we look. And then, caricatures of us,
and making money off of us being in conflict with one another.
100%.
Yeah.
And loving that, and that's like getting the slaves fighting, that kind of thing.
Divide and conquer.
Yes. And then, so self-hatred, but we don't have to hold that. We can change it. Like, the 60s, the Black Power movement, all the different stuff that happened, that, learning that melanin is very powerful. Melanin is a transmuter of divine light. Now, again, that you get through the sun. God gives us information and we feel it, and then we translate it to others, And then another thing is unfulfilled purpose. So many of these other mothers, and some of it's just mental illness. Some of it could just be mental illness, trauma that's not been healed or medicated, or, you don't always need medication or other things. And then trauma upon trauma in these containers of racism and sexism. That's a double whammy, especially if you're identifiable. You can't run. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. You don't get the benefit of the doubt. So them having the unfulfilled purpose, and they see their daughter being able to do this and that, and there's resentment and rage, but then they don't understand the other things is that it's just as bad. It's just different. Racism has just changed. It's not, it was horrible back then, but I'm saying it's still around, and it's just changed. It's still there. It's still, and also that like at the end of life, which is really sad. I think that, what is the name of that book? I'm trying to think of the woman who wrote it. She's a Jungian, a Black, Archetypal Grief. She's African-American psychologist, like one of few ones that are Jungian therapists. And she said the traumas we're seeing with people being killed, on television, the boys. There's also, say her name, there's all these Black women are being killed, in police custody and every other places with each other and stuff. But she says this was how they used to do that in slavery. I didn't know. She wrote this book, Archetypal Grief, and it talks about them publicly killing kids.
Oh, wow.
So this is a lot of grief that, and we didn't have the right to talk about it.
Yeah. So the ancestral grief, right? The post-traumatic slave syndrome, the coping difficulties like the self-hatred, the resentment, so all these other layers of pain that some Black mothers, mental illness, that some Black mothers have not processed, and they project that onto their daughters. And so you're talking about addressing all the layers of pain in terms of the treatment for the Black daughter, right? So in a moment, I want to circle back around to you because I want to talk about the healing for the Black mother, okay? Because they're hurting too. Right?
Yes, and those layers have to do with like the aura. So when I became an energy healer, you heal layers. I realized that's why I was a healer.
And Carolyn, can you send me the name of your book so I can put that in the description section so people can read the book too?
Okay, yeah. One more thing is another thing that mothers is hating the father. If they hate I see this over and over. They will take it out if the girl looks like the father or the father like the girl over. That was another huge theme I saw.
Oh, and that goes to what Tisha was talking about, like mother and daughter same level, as opposed to mother is the mother, right? So seeing the daughter as a threat or a competitor or something related to the dad. Oh, that's deep. That's deep. Thank you, Carolyn. What about for you, Danny, as a reparenting coach? What are some of the ways that you help Black women, your Black women clients, heal when they have this challenging relationship with their mother?
Yeah, one of the first things that we start with is a form of exposure therapy that manifests as narrative journaling.
Hmm.
And it's so important. It seems like, oh, it's just journaling, but it is so critical to making progress, because I would say it's like 9 out of 10 clients who commit to doing their journaling and don't shy away from it recover. They see transformation. They move past their struggles. Whereas clients who just want to talk about what happened and think about what happened, but are not willing to face it on paper, tend to stagnate. And so longhand narrative journaling about your childhood memories, whatever. Usually when clients come to me, since they're in some stage of dealing with CPTSD, they're having flashbacks. They have these painful memories that are like top of mind and tend to be intrusive. And that's where we start, is just getting those memories down on paper, but doing it in a way that feels graphic, almost like writing out a police report. So you're writing out the colors that you remember, the feeling of the wind on your face, or like the music that was playing in the background. You want to capture every piece of the memory that you have and recreate it on paper, so you can not only purge the memory and free some space in your mind, but so that you can see very plainly what it is that has happened. And it is a way of gradually coming to terms with the traumatic incidents that you've experienced. Because I think at first, when we have to go no contact, when we have to accept our parent is a narcissist, we're stunned, we're shocked. It's the initial stage of even realizing that you have that post-traumatic stress. And so coming to terms with what you have experienced based on which memories are tangible and immediately available to you is how we begin to locate your inner child. Something that Carolyn said resonated with me. When you experience trauma, your soul experience separation. Experiences separation. And so retrieving those pieces of self, the work that I do with clients, we call it inner child healing. We are locating the inner child where she is, wherever you two were separated. And by backtracking our way through your traumatic memories, we can locate the pieces of her that are missing and slowly integrate them into your adult self, your grown woman identity, so that you can have some ownership of her, so that you can create security for her. You can begin to get to know her as a different person. A lot of times I tell clients who are starting out to refer to their inner child as she or her, to speak of her in the third person as a different person than you, because in many ways she is. Your inner child is the oldest part of you. She's the most objective part of you. She is the bearer of your truth. And this adult identity that you're living out is an amalgamation of who you're expected to be, who you have become to survive. She's racked up in maladaptive behaviors and limiting beliefs. So she's not always as honest with you as your inner child may be. So learning to separate what's coming from your ego and what's coming from your inner child is really helpful, as far as giving you some guidance for how to care for yourself in the beginning. Because typically when you are just coming out of being abused by your parent, you hate your inner child. You struggle with that.
Why is that, Danny?
Because when we are abused by our parents, we blame ourselves as children. The way that we understand that, the way that we survive that experience, is to blame ourselves, because we need to maintain our image of our parents as pristine, as safe, as trustworthy.
Yes.
And so when you've taken the first step of cutting the abuser out of your life. But now you're left with this awkward relationship because you have this disgruntled inner child who's just sitting in the corner of your life and you don't like her. You blame her for being mistreated. You project onto her that it is her fault, that she's wrong, her childish ways, her individual instincts, her being a unique individual, her being herself will trigger you to lash out at her, to want to harshly correct her, to criticize her. And initially you take over the role of being your own abuser. When you cut the mother out of your life, you start to observe the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you think about yourself, the ways that you might punish and self-sabotage yourself as a result of being abused. Often Black women will withhold self-care as a form of punishment. They will know the thing that they need to do or that they should do to feel better, how they can care for themselves. They know the thing that will make them feel good, but they won't do it because they're trapped in a cycle of settling, of not being cared for, of being mistreated. So when you initially remove those abusers, you cut out the abusive parent, you get rid of the toxic partner, maybe you even quit the job, maybe you move out of the country and you're really trying to create a new and safe space for yourself. When you get to your location, you're still going to have that dissonance between you and your inner child if you do not dig in and do the work of mending that relationship.
Wow.
And so narrative journaling is a great way to pop the top on that.
That's profound.
Now, so much of what you said, Carolyn, especially what you said about Black women, a lot of times are not meant to be in the roles they're in their workplace. That is ringing so many bells for me because what I'll say, I haven't talked about it too much. I only barely touched on it on my own YouTube channel. But right around the time that I was also going no contact with my mother, I experienced the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I don't know what that means to everyone on the call. I identified as a Christian, as a believer. I was like in my late 20s at that point for my whole life, and I never knew about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. So I just stumbled upon it, as a result of trying to follow God and find healing and find the resources that I need. But when I say that, I always recommend the auricular acupuncture. But if you are a believer, if you're someone who resonates, for whom the Bible resonates, then the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of praying in tongues, if you have not yet experienced that, I would advise you to press in you can find your communities. That is something that is a game changer. Acts chapter 1, verse 8. I love that particular verse of scripture because it's the last thing that Jesus says. It's like, if you have the red letter version, it's the last thing that he says. And I feel like in church, we are preached the gospel up until a certain point, up until about John chapter 20, until Jesus is risen and we know that we have a reason to celebrate our Easter Sunday. But what happens between the time that he's risen and the time that he ascends into heaven, I think is intentionally overlooked, is intentionally muddled. And what he says in that verse is that you will receive power. And as a Christian, as a believer, I like to stay away from the word Christian because I don't want to be associated with religion or the church. But as a believer, it changed my life to understand that the first baptism, receiving Christ, was not it, that there was a second leg to the reason that Jesus made his journey. And that was so that I could receive a new power, a new level of power with a manifestation that is miraculous. And that baptism of the Holy Spirit is a gateway for the supernatural in your life as a believer. But it also endows you with the power you're going to need to face down all of your pain, all of your trauma, for you to achieve that Chiron journey in your life of overcoming the unique trauma that sort of defines your mission here. You need that power. It's the power that will lead you to the cross in your life. It's the power that allows you to fulfill your unique ministry. And the pain of going no contact and really facing your childhood traumas is not something that you can do without that extra support. Yes, you need a one-on-one, you need an objective party. But again, if you're someone who identifies as a believer, I don't recommend that you take this on without really gaining that intimacy with the Holy Spirit, because it's necessary.
Yeah. So really talking about, both of you guys are talking about integration, right? So soul on a deeper level, right? And also that inner little girl. And when we don't address that, then you're not really getting at the core issues, right? So, excuse me. I want to address something before we move on. There was a comment in the chat, and I want to address this. So I think you may have missed the beginning of the conversation, the comment in the chat. And again, I want to reiterate that we're talking about challenging relationships with Black mothers and daughters. In no way am I saying that all relationships with Black mothers and daughters are challenging or difficult. So I think you may have missed the beginning. We are talking about these situations because Black women have come to me and have requested this topic. So that's why we're talking about these challenging relationships, because if this is not your experience and you can't relate to it, then this is probably not the video for you, okay? But I'm speaking to, all of us are speaking to Black women who are having challenging relationships with their daughter, with Black daughters who are having challenging relationships with their mothers, because nobody talks about it really. And so this is what this format is for. So I don't know if you missed the beginning in terms of the assumption is that we're talking about all relationships with Black mothers and daughters. That is not what we're doing right now. Okay, so I just want to clarify that, okay, before we move on. So Carolyn, I'm kind of dumbfounded about something, and I think maybe many viewers are dumbfounded about something too. The Black mothers, right? So we're talking about healing for Black daughters.
Yeah.
What about the healing for the Black mothers? For you, have you had clients who were Black mothers and you heard, in terms of what they were saying, they were engaging in behavior that was negative towards their Black daughters? Again, we're not talking about all Black mothers, right? But some Black mothers, have you had that experience where you heard that? And how did you address that when you heard that the dynamic was a little off?
Yeah. And several, times that happen. I've had mothers twice. I've had Black clients. They're actually therapists who brought their mothers in to talk, openly about it. And that was a really, really brave step. I've had that a couple times out here and then also in LA. And I remember a woman who was so mad her 16-year-old daughter, this was when I worked in medical, had a baby at 16, and the daughter would not put that baby down. She was just holding on to it, and the mother's like, nope, you got to give it up. I'm like, oh my God, you have to, it's nope, you're not, this is not thing, you're going to Howard, you're going to blah, blah, blah. And I really had to pull her aside and say, she will not, they wouldn't let her, let the nurses touch the baby. She was so in love with this baby. And I kept at her, and she was reporting me, and I didn't care, because it was a little girl, like, loved her little baby, and she was a straight A student, and she was still doing well. And then finally, at the end, the mother pulled me aside, maybe like 3 days she was there. It was a traumatic birth too. I was lucky that baby survived. And she said, I think I'm gonna keep her and the baby. I was like, well, good. Because, but only because the little girl wasn't ready to let go of that. And like doing that in the hospital setting, doing it in the ER, we see a lot of it when people are dying. When I worked ICU, and having to have family meetings, and well, you never loved me, and that kind of thing. But and I have had mothers come to me that have said that they don't like their daughters.
Wow.
I actually had a social worker I worked with that was so nasty to me, and I realized later, my coworker, when she died, this woman, she said, "Oh, you look just like her daughter." I'm like, "Well, that's what it was," because it was just like, you are a licensed social worker. You're gonna really. It was just so distorted. And when people say, well, why are you talking about this? Are you kidding? We're a culture of trauma. So of course trauma is going to happen to the mother and the daughter. The mother's a nurturer. She's got to work. She's got to do this and that, So I hear them too. I have a lot of mothers that I've never been to therapy. I've never talked to somebody about this. I've never been able to express this, even now. And we will, talk, and they've shifted relationships sometimes with their daughter. Now, these are like basic. When you have some of the stories that are coming up are like narcissists, like really where it's just like this person needs to be committed, or they are extreme abuse. And actually, a lot of the women in my group, they had cut off contact with their mothers, and there's like no judgment for that. But for these older women, what did they do? They had sororities. They would talk at the beauty parlor. They had different types of healing that weren't therapeutic. So they were limited at their time, and there were limited therapists of color, and there are some other good therapists that are not of color, but a lot of times I find they stereotype, and they make the person doesn't even feel comfortable or safe. I mean, I worked at this clinic. I heard horror stories. When there were like 5 more of us hired, we all went out to dinner. These Black therapists. He said, "We're finally able to." All the patients said, "I'm so glad you're Black, and I could just tell you this without judgment," because. And again, they're not always good matches, but they said like 4 or 5 of them. I mean, there's a clinic of 40 therapists in a Black community, and only 2 Black. 1.5.
Wow.
I was 1. There was another 0.5. That was it. And I had this campaign that couldn't stand me, but too bad, because it was heartbreaking to me to go to IOP, intensive outpatient, and see 80% of the people are Black women in there because they don't want to hear their stories.
Right.
Just throw them in a group, So when you have older women that have been through that, and a lot of them were older, and I relate, and this is how I was able to talk about universe, because our go-to a lot of times is church. So I relate spiritual, universal topics to them, and talked about the spirit. And, they would say it one way, the Latinos said it another way, the Jewish person, but everyone understood they had a spirit, they had an energy inside of them that was helping them to guide them, and so helping them to connect on that level. These are older, most of them were older, because a lot of the women who ended up in these programs were in their mid 50s or 60s. And they would tell different stories. Like I remember one woman had a really hard time. The family, she was, an addict, a crack addict, and the family was really mean to her, and she had problems with her mother, and the family was against her. So then she started crying and crying and crying. Intensive outpatient program, the white therapist said, "Can you go take her out, talk to her, because she's disturbing the group?" So I went and talked to her, and she said, "Yeah, I was a crackhead for years, but I've been clean for 20 years, and they still don't hold it against me. My mother used to beat me, and I was abused, and all this other stuff." And when the other therapist came to me, the white therapist said, "Well, what happened to her? Like, she's never cried like that." I said, "Well, her being an addict." She goes, "I've worked with her for 6 years. She's never told me that."
Wow. Oh my
I
gosh.
heard that all the time. Now, again, there are, like we had said before, there's other good therapists, that you can help. But it was just interesting. So the healing, when the mothers were trying to get help, it was stereotyped. It was like out of a booklet that was based on people's stereotypes and not reality. It was marginalized. It was, well, you have, and I've heard this from when I worked with Latinos, like, "Oh, you guys are not into family. Or you guys don't understand family." Like,
So those are the Black mothers who actually seek help, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm wondering also, and I'm just making an assumption. Right? So a lot of Black women that I work with or who come to me have said, "I've had these issues with my mother, and she won't go to therapy. She just won't do that," right? So part of it is also, and I started listening to this really good audiobook, everybody, called Breaking Generational Curses, or Generational Curses, by Dr. Mariel Bouquet. Excellent book. And she was talking about when the mother is not willing or open to get support, that you have to focus on the individual. You have to focus on your own healing if the mother is not open to that. So I think that the challenge is there's the Black mothers who try to get help, and they might have therapists who don't understand them, or they feel like they can't open up. But then you have the other Black mothers who are not seeking help, right? And then when that happens, I think it's working with the Black daughter in terms of coming to an acceptance that your mother is not open to therapy. She's not open to healing, right? In that regard.
There is, and there's also what I said. I mentioned like you're not a problem, you're a prophet, and that's
Mhm.
what kind of touching upon what Danny said is about prayer and the Holy Spirit healing.
Yeah.
And I do something called soul healing, where you talk to the soul of a contract of a mother, because sometimes you can pray for your boss that's difficult. People had a really hard time with it.
Mhm.
And that's only if people feel suited, and because everyone's a soul and they would change it. And you could pray for the soul of your parent,
Mhm.
and then the parent may change, or they may stop it a little bit. And again,
Mhm.
not all situations.
Right.
And that's why people say, well, pray for them, pray for their soul, and
Mhm.
give it back to them. But there is really, really unhealthy, toxics where you just can't. It's sad. It's a grief period, and I think
Yeah.
somebody else had talked about that,
The
where you
acceptance of
cannot,
for what it
Tisha.
is.
Yeah, you can't. There's no going back. There's
Yeah.
no difficult things. And I've had situations, since we kind of went there with the Holy Spirit and speaking tongues, is I've had women had their mothers come in their dreams and not always apologize, but say, like having, premonitions and saying, okay, I wasn't as good as I thought,
Mm.
or yeah, I mean, you can go deep with this stuff because, we're all connected. And
Mhm.
just like kind of in Black Panther, when the guy goes to his
The other
parents,
side.
grandpa, yeah, into the
Yeah.
earth, and start speaking. I mean, these are all different rituals that we're supposed to pass the baton
Yeah.
to the other generation. And if they don't have a hand to hold it, it gets dropped. So that doesn't mean that you can't go back and pick up the baton and run with them or run without them ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tisha, I think you came off mute.
Yeah, I wanted to jump into this. I mean, this discussion has been amazing. I think one of the things that I do want to say is that I do not believe that my mother is a narcissist. I don't believe that at all. I do believe, on the other hand, that she is emotionally immature and has been emotionally stunted. I
Hmm.
believe a lot of that has to do with her relationship with her mother.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I'm very clear about is that my relationship with my mother will not in any way be reflective of the one she had with hers. Um, and to this day, my mother is sick. So I don't know if we talked about this before, but the women in my family got sick early. So my mom has had rheumatoid arthritis since she was in her 40s. Her sister
Wow.
had colon cancer and subsequently had a stroke before she was 55.
Oh my
I
goodness.
believe a lot of that had to do with their relationship, their familial relationship, and how that how the mental health showed up in their body. And I
Hmm.
said this oftentimes in a flip way, and as I do more study, I realize it's not really flip. But I was like, I'm not about to let y'all kill me or make me sick.
Hmm.
And that was really, intuitive. I couldn't put language to it, but I knew, trying to maintain those unhealthy relationships, I'd seen what it looks like
Hmm.
when you're not dealing with it, when you're under this toxic
Hmm.
stress. And
Hmm.
so with regard to my mother, a lot of what she believes is unforgiveness on my part. And that's not necessarily the case. What it is a recognition of a continued role. So forgiveness is really about things that have happened in the past, but our relationship continues to be with me being the mothering one, and she's, wanting to be nurtured and taken care of because she didn't get it from her mother. So when
Hmm.
we go back to the healing aspect, and what Carolyn said is, I can't loop back to do any healing with regard to my mom. One, I haven't decided that that's my job.
Hmm.
But two is, until I get on the other side of it, I can't lovingly be
Hmm.
in relationship with her where we can both heal. So
Hmm.
I'm in the spot where right now it's just we're distant. I
Hmm.
don't want to say that what she did was right, but looking back intuitively, I can understand where it came from, but it's still no less painful. So I
Right.
want to be able to say it's not, in my case, as extreme as maybe saying that my mom is narcissistic, but
Hmm.
certainly emotionally immature.
Yes, an unhealthy dynamic, and that you recognize the need to have that boundary and very clear about what your role is and what it will not be, right?
Correct.
I
Correct.
hear you. I hear you. So, as we're running, I know we're a little over. So, I want to ask all panelists, okay? So, to our last video, to the part one, I've had some comments, I've had people contact me about the last video, and they have said this topic was so needed. They were so thankful we had this conversation. They also said they really desperately want to have a different relationship with their mother. And they tried to share with their mother the video, and their mother was very defensive. Okay. So as we're winding down, all of you, I would love to hear from each of you. What words of wisdom can you offer to these women who are watching now, who've watched in the past, and they desperately want a different relationship with their mother? They're trying to engage in this conversation about healing, and the mother does not want to hear it. Okay. What words of wisdom can you offer? I see, Danny, you had your hand raised. Yes.
I can answer this question and sort of connect to the last question as well.
Mm-hmm.
It is really important to identify whether or not your parent is a narcissistic abuser. Because if they are not narcissistic, if they are not identifying, or if they're not showing up as what a narcissistic parent would typically come across as, there might be room for healing. There might be space for therapy. I know that it works sometimes for some mothers and daughters. If your mother is a narcissist, it's critical. It's the first step, is to come to terms with the fact that your parent is a narcissist, because narcissists will not engage in therapy in a genuine way. Going into the therapist's office is just setting yourself up to be further manipulated, gaslighted, triangulated with the therapist. Your parent is not going to engage. If they have the ability to engage genuinely, they would do it in your relationship, and you wouldn't need a therapist. So if your parent really is that narcissist, it's difficult, because it's like coming to terms with the fact that you really don't have a parent. Yes, you had your mom or dad, but you did not have a parent. Coming to terms with that realization that you, in some ways, are an emotional orphan, and learning to identify that way is so painful. It is. It is the initial sort of rupture of that emotional wound, but you have to take control of understanding what that means. If you don't choose to identify, it's called self-orphaning. Before we can reparent, you have to self-orphan. And it is that grieving process, right? You are shedding your identity as mommy's little girl or daddy's little girl, whatever you believed that you had as a child growing up. And it allows you to take the steps necessary to heal and to recover, but you do it without your parent, because your narcissistic parent is not going to take the steps. If they would, they would have done it. It's in fact what makes them a narcissist, is they have been so crippled by trauma in their early childhood. They were not afforded resources or opportunity or safety, whatever the case may be, to address that trauma and heal from it. And so it's become chronic at this point. The way that they engage with the world is through manipulation, is through control, and they're not really capable or interested in unconditional love. So if that's what you're really after, you're going to continue to be disappointed if you seek that from your parent. And the sooner you learn that and press forward, you can heal for yourself. And to go full circle with the mention of the Holy Spirit, I was recently looking, I feel like I found biblical evidence for our need to go no contact with our parent. And this is not just if your parent is a narcissist, but Jesus was not able to fulfill his mission here on earth while staying together with his family. He had to leave his hometown. He had to be apart from the parents that raised him and from the community that he came from in order to become the person that could bring healing to everyone. And in fact, when he stepped out of that tomb victorious, the first person that he saw and spoke to was his mother. And he was able in that exchange to endow her with the Holy Spirit. So although the healing that he obtained was something only he could do, he was able to give it to his mother, who could not obtain it for herself. And spiritually, when we go no contact, when we do the work of recovery, when we do the work of then ascending and becoming our highest self and operating out of our divine energy in the world, we are able to usher our parents and our entire bloodline. We obtain that healing for everyone. So those feelings of guilt that you might have about leaving your parent behind, that is smoke and mirrors. When you get the healing, your mother gets it too. You are going to pray your mother's healing into existence. If you are manifesting all these wonderful things, you still love your mother even after going no contact, and you will be the one to intercede for her and for your abusers. When you truly do the work of ascending above the trauma, you will also be the one to bring that healing to those who hurt you. And so those will be my closing thoughts.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Danny, when I hear you and Tisha, it's like we're talking about not only complex relationships that some Black mothers and daughters have, but it's also on a continuum in terms of the complex relationship. So it could be the narcissistic abuser, it could be the complex relationship, it could be some struggles, whatever. But it's important to distinguish where are you on that continuum to see what type of healing is even possible. So I'm glad you brought that up. What about for you, Tisha? What would you say to Black women watching this? They really want some type of healing with their mother, and mom is just not having it. She's just defensive.
I think the quote that I would that comes to mind is, it takes two people to want to reconcile and heal a relationship. It only takes one to destroy it. So, we can desperately want something from someone who likes the way things are. And so I think we have to be honest about what it is that we're dealing with. You can't make someone else change. You can't change another person. You can focus on your own healing. And one of the quotes that Leslie Vernick says is, I know that this is their problem, but what's your problem with their problem? And so the issue comes down to, yes, your mother may have this issue, but what is your problem with that issue? And like Danny said, is you have to be okay with knowing that that parent may not want to change things. They may not have the energy to change things. They're perfectly okay with the way that they are. They're perfectly okay being above their daughter rather than them being partners in this life or choosing to have an adult relationship. This is how it was with my mother. This is just how it's going to be. This is how I want you to revere me. You either take it or leave it. I think that oftentimes it's really us. I can speak for myself. I can't speak for other people. One of the issues, or one of the things I had to be very clear about, is my issue was not my mother changing. My issue was not knowing how to set a boundary and living with the consequences of saying, no, this is not going to happen. I wanted my family to change so that I wouldn't have to set a boundary. That was my own healing work that I had to do. And so, I think we just kind of have to be clear about what's their work and what's our work. And sometimes the things that we want may not happen. We've got to change ourselves. We've got to focus on how we deal with ourselves and not necessarily trying to change them.
Yeah. It comes to, like I said, comes to the realization about that, which can be very difficult. Thank you, Tisha. What about for you, Mira?
And I just want to say, what Danny said is so true. So I just wanted to say that because I actually did a therapy session with my mom years ago, and she manipulated the whole session. Her goal was just to get me back in her house. This is when I left her house. And she was lying about things that did happen. So that is true. When you are dealing with a parent who is a narcissist, they take zero accountability and they will manipulate the situation. But in regards of the question, it kind of makes me think about like when you're on an airplane and they say put your oxygen mask on first. You gotta. It is hard when you want to tell somebody this is the problem and they just are not taking it in. But the fact that you yourself know that it's a problem and you see it and you're willing to work on it. The rest, I just just putting it in God's hands at that point. You got to put yourself first.
Yeah. Self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mira. What about for you, Carolyn?
So I think that also, like they were mentioning, if somebody's an abuser, a narcissist, they're like an addicted to the rage and the anger and the manipulation. And any addict, they can't do recovery unless they say I'm an addict, I'm
Sure,
horrible. But the
sure.
part of this pathology is that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm great, especially for
Right,
narcissists.
right,
It's projection.
right.
So there is a separation there. And I think it's in some spiritual communities. I know I work with a lot of women who are fatherless and motherless. And I'm saying these people are alive. They're just not connected to them because of their
Mm,
addicts or something happened and they weren't helpful to them. Is that you connect to God the Father, and there is Mother Earth, but there is a holy, either Mother Mary, the Holy Spirit, and Mary Magdalene. To me, as a person of color, I've had a lot of interesting spiritual experiences, where sometimes people, it sounds so like, oh, you're going to connect to an entity that's not really real, but I feel like that's for a higher journey.
mm,
And like Mara said, you can give this over to God. God sees what you've been through, the
mhm.
universe, and that you don't deserve to be abused,
Right, right.
and that you have to come to grips at first identifying what kind of pathology is this parent. Is it something that you want to salvage? But can you salvage it with just soul to soul?
Yeah.
And I've done soul to soul work, but it's too much to get into. But I think sending a video would just blow them up, even mad, because you're still in that vulnerable space. Going to
Mhm,
therapy if they're not ready to take recovery of their issue is not going to help.
mhm,
But connecting to the Divine Father and the Divine Mother, and again, getting
mhm.
into Earth. I talk about helping Mother Earth. The Earth is brown. I think Mother Earth. We started in Africa, in Ethiopia, and respecting her. Look how she's been treated. And I know that sounds like really simplistic, but there is something there about the Navajo. Did the blue crystals were for God the Father, and the red coral was for Mother Earth. And the same way that we've raped the earth that happened to women of color, I think is important to kind of respect the earth energy. And if it's the Holy Mother, some people are Oshun, Yamaya. There's all these different spiritual goddesses that you can also connect to. That can be your quote unquote spirit guides, spirit mothers, and also guardian angels. And there's
Yeah.
different ways, but I just don't feel like, if there's a fire, don't jump in, because you will get
Mm.
burned.
Oh,
So yeah, that's not cool, but there's other loving, and there's maybe ancestors. My grandmother was this loving, sweet fourth grade education woman, and I'll call her soul in if I need a spiritual hug. Uh,
yeah.
though, me and my mom did end on a good note, ironically, because she was intuitive and she knew she was going, and she knew that everything that we went through, that she would have to accord with the divine, and she kind of told me
Mm,
that. So, I mean, I just luckily had a peek into that. But it is about self-preservation, identifying the person, getting your own help, like everyone says, taking care of yourself and
yeah.
grieving that loss that may have never been. And somebody talked about a past life in there in the chat. I think that can happen. You can like
Mhm.
keep going in cycles and cycles, and that's why you give it back to them, because every soul deals with how they've treated their children. Are very sacred, and if
Yeah.
it's a gift and you can't handle it, there is repercussions, and only the divine knows what those will be.
Yeah. So I hope the main takeaway that everyone heard out of this is that you have to take care of yourself first. You have to see and get this treatment support, the healing that you need, and distinguish and determine if your mother is open for healing and support. Because if she's narcissistic behaviors, that's not going to work. Okay. So be clear about that. Okay. So we are so over that I don't have time to go over the chat, but the chat has been very appreciative, right? People resonating a lot with what has been said. So as we're winding down, for real, if you all can share how people can contact you and any last words as we're winding down. So I'll start with you, Mara.
Okay. Yes. So I do have a YouTube channel called Let's Talk About It with Mara. Um, at this point, it's kind of like a journal entry. I just kind of just talk about the things that I'm going through, the things that I'm realizing, and just things that I need to get off my chest. I was never had a voice at all growing up. Um, so this is kind of like my way of just speaking. and telling my story. Um, I'm thinking about writing another ebook about daughters healing from narcissistic mothers, mainly mother and daughters. So that's something that I'm thinking about. Um, I'm also thinking about maybe doing healing board sessions, because I did create a healing board. And I did that when I first went no contact with my mom, for me to kind of like cope. Um, and another thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm so sorry,
Mhm.
another good community that has been really good for me is CODA meetings. I don't know if you guys ever heard of CODA, but they're kind of like 12-step programs for those who suffer from codependency. So
Mm.
I've been going, I stopped for a while because it was triggering for me at first, because my mom is also a recovering addict, and I was always in any meetings with her as a kid.
Mm.
So when I went to the CODA meetings, I was kind of like, this feels kind of, but it's really good to be in community of people who are literally going through the same thing that you're going through. Like when I hear people sharing these meetings, I'm like, wow, like I'm not alone. Like
Mm.
it feels great. And there even there are ACA meetings for those who are adult child and grew up with parents who have who were alcoholics or dysfunction. So there are free communities out there, and they're really helpful. They're really, really helpful. And I think my last final word is just, you're not alone. If you're dealing with you know narcissistic, toxic, or just difficult mom, parent, dad, I don't know, like, you're not by yourself. And community is really amazing.
Yeah, I just want to say something, Mara, really quickly, is that I appreciate that you have found your voice and you've refused to be silenced, and that you have utilized and shown agency. So when therapy didn't work out with certain therapists, you're like, no, boom, I'm gonna find a different therapist. And even all the courageous steps that you've made, I'm just so amazed by
Thank
that. And I
you.
just want to tell you that, I feel like like a mother figure to you,
Thank
right? And
you.
just tell you I'm proud of you and all
Thank
that you've
you.
done, because that's amazing what you've done. So thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
And
Thank you.
everything you shared, I want to include that in the description section too. So we'll add that later, okay?
Oh,
So
thank
thank
you.
you, Mara. What about for you, Tisha?
Hey, you can find me on www.transform with Tisha. There you can find a free download called Radiant Reinvention. It's a 12-step roadmap for triumph over loss. I'm on YouTube, the Midlife Makeover Movement YouTube channel, and you can find me on Instagram, the Midlife Makeover Maven. Now, I also have a Facebook group, the Midlife Makeover Movement. It's a private group.
Awesome. Thank you, Tisha.
Mhm.
Danny, what about for you?
So I also have a YouTube channel. I'm Danny Went No Contact on YouTube, where I explore healing from maternal narcissistic abuse as it pertains to Black women. I talk to Black women who have gone no contact, and Black women who are knowledgeable about healing modalities that are helpful. And so that is my YouTube channel, and my website, ellisoninc.com. If you go there and subscribe, you get added to the mailing list, which will give you access to just monthly events. And also in that very first welcome email, you have access to my ebook, The Going No Contact Guide. It's a digital handbook for those who are considering no contact and just want a better understanding of what all they should be considering before they actually take the leap and go no contact. And so that is a good resource. It's also where I offer one-on-one coaching for women who are really serious about removing that abuse from their life and then processing the trauma so they can move forward and ascend into their highest self. And my final thoughts would just be to let women who are at the beginning of this journey
Mhm.
know that the residual benefits of staying no contact are worth it. The getting to know the woman that you truly are meant to be, that you have the potential to become, is
Mhm.
more fulfilling than playing a role or going through motions in a relationship with a parent or anyone who doesn't really see you as
Mhm.
an equal or a human being. And
Yeah.
you deserve to have that love and fulfillment within for yourself. You deserve a relationship with your inner child. She is worth finding. She's worth knowing. And I would love to help any woman who is is brave enough to face this down, I'm ready to help her do it.
Yeah. And I was just inspired when you said that, Danny. I felt like the inner little girl is in there crying, right? Please go save her. Please go reconnect to her.
Yes.
And Danny, you're the first person I've ever heard. So when I saw you on Stephanie Perry and Glenn Mazzini, you were the first person I've ever heard talk about no contact with a mother. So I just appreciate the work that you're doing. And I just want to say thank you. And Tisha, I want to say thank you to you because we were on a different panel together. We were talking about something totally different. And Tisha started talking. I was like, oh, you got to be on the next panel too. So I want to say thank you to both of you. And Carolyn, what words of wisdom can you offer? And also, please share with people about services you offer and how they can contact you.
Yeah, so my website is Intuitive Soul Healing, and I am an intuitive healer. And I also, I think it's the 17th, I work on Insight Timer as a meditation teacher. So I'm doing a meditation for Black people for Black History Month, and kind of like healing, connecting to ancestors and healing. It's a meditation. I, talk through it. And I have several meditations on there that people have really liked, connecting to the soul, the higher self, and the spirit. And I feel like everyone's on a spiritual journey, and I really honor the path. And working with many, many different cultures, I've seen the power of Black women and the power of just, I really believe that this planet is going to make a whole 360. But that's another thing. We're going to go back to where we started in many ways of respecting the wisdom of the earth and the wisdom of the ancestors. And whenever I hear people say we need to honor our ancestors, like in the Bible, I'm like, what about the ancestors of humanity? Why aren't we doing that? And by the time we get to that level, I think the planet will be more at peace. So love yourself. You're valuable, you're worthy, you're deserving, and your journey is very unique and golden, and you are anointed no matter who you are. So thank you for having me.
Beautiful. And I just want to say, Carolyn, you brought such deep richness, contextual grounding to this conversation. So appreciate you as well. So everyone who's watching this video, please give this video a thumbs up. Also share this video with at least 2 other Black women. If you have not already subscribed to my channel and all of these women, if you have not contacted them, please reach out to all of them. I'll have all their information in the description section. Please reach out to all these amazing, brilliant, beautiful Black women. I'm so grateful to all of you. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Lifting Us with Climb Consulting, Wellness Services. Join with me in the journey as you are leaving a toxic job. I can help you leave, okay? And again, share this video with at least 2 other Black women. Okay, so everyone, I'm signing off. Please be well. Panelists, if you can stay on for one moment. And everyone else, take care. Thank you for watching.